He sold his wedding ring just to feed his daughter. But when the pawnshop owner saw the picture inside, she whispered, "I've kept this photo 20 years, and what she said next would change his life forever." Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The December morning bit into Ethan Carter's bones as he blinked awake on the worn couch. The springs dug into his back, a daily reminder of how far they'd fallen. Through the thin walls of their small apartment, he could hear the rumble of early morning traffic and the clanking of the ancient radiator that barely kept the cold at bay. He glanced at his daughter Lily's bedroom door, still closed. Good. She needed her sleep, especially on days like this when breakfast would be scarce. Ethan's joints creaked as he made his way to the kitchen, his socked feet padding across the cold linoleum floor. The refrigerator light flickered weakly as he opened the door. His heart sank at the sight. A nearly empty bottle of ketchup lay on its side, and 3 dented cans of beans sat in the bottom drawer. He closed the door and leaned his forehead against it, counting backward from 10 like his late wife Sarah used to do when things got tough. A gentle knock at the front door made him jump. Through the peephole, he saw Mr. Jenkins, their landlord, shifting from foot to foot in the hallway. Ethan's stomach twisted as he opened the door. "Morning, Mr. Jenkins." The older man wouldn't meet his eyes. "Ethan, I've tried to be patient, but..." He thrust a white envelope forward. "I'm sorry. I really am." Ethan's hands trembled as he took the notice. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. "How long?" "You've got 3 days. I can't extend it anymore." After Mr. Jenkins left, Ethan sank into a kitchen chair, the eviction notice crumpling in his grip. The words blurred as he stared at them. Notice to quit. "Daddy?" He quickly wiped his eyes and turned to see Lily standing in, her doorway, her brown hair wild from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She looked so much like Sarah, it made his chest ache. "Hey, princess, sleep okay?" She nodded, padding over to him in her mismatched socks. "What's that paper?" Ethan tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "Come here, sweetheart. We need to talk." Lily climbed onto his lap, something she hadn't done in a while. She was getting so big, but right now she seemed as small as ever. "Are we in trouble?" "Things are tough right now," he admitted, holding her close. "The garage closed down, and I haven't found new work yet. Mr. Jenkins needs us to." He swallowed hard. "We need to find a new place to live." "But this is our home," Lily whispered. "All my drawings are on the walls. And Mommy's pictures." "I know, baby. I know." He stroked her hair, remembering how Sarah used to do the same thing. "But home isn't just a place. It's wherever we're together, right?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "I'm hungry, Daddy." Those 3 words shattered what was left of his heart. He glanced at his left hand, where his wedding ring caught the weak morning light. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "It's not just a ring, Ethan. It's a promise." "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "What, Daddy?" He kissed the top of Lily's head. "Nothing, princess. Listen, I need to go somewhere this morning. Mrs. Rodriguez next door will check on you, okay?" After getting Lily settled with their kind neighbor, Ethan stood in their tiny bathroom, staring at his reflection. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his face looked older than his 42 years. Slowly, he worked the gold band off his finger. It felt wrong, like peeling off a layer of skin. Inside the ring was the tiny photograph he'd almost forgotten about, him and Sarah on their wedding day, laughing in the sunshine. She'd had it specially made, a secret compartment in the band. "So, you'll always carry our happiness with you," she'd said. His hand shook as he walked through the cold morning air toward Main Street. The pawn shop's windows were grimy, but the open sign glowed like a beacon of last resort. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ring grew warm in his pocket as he walked, as if Sarah's love still lingered in the metal. He remembered the day she'd slipped it on his finger, her eyes shining with tears and joy. In good times and bad, she'd promised. But she couldn't have known the bad would come so soon, or that he'd end up here, about to trade their symbol of forever for a few days' worth of groceries. Outside the pawn shop, Ethan stopped. His fingers closed around the ring one last time, feeling the smooth metal and the slight ridge where the hidden photograph lay. A tear rolled down his cheek, freezing in the December air. "I'm doing this for Lily," he whispered to the morning sky. "You'd understand that, wouldn't you, Sarah? You'd want me to take care of our girl." The ring felt impossibly heavy as he reached for the shop's door handle. The bell above would announce his surrender to circumstance, his failure as a provider, a father, a husband. But it would also mean food in Lily's belly, and right now, that had to be enough. His fingers trembled as they wrapped around the door handle. The metal was cold against his palm, like the ghost of promises he couldn't keep. The bell above the door chimed softly as Ethan stepped into Maggie's pawn and repair. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the biting cold he'd just left behind. His fingers, still gripping the ring in his pocket, had gone numb during the walk over. The shop was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town pawn store, crowded but carefully organized. Glass display cases lined the walls, filled with watches, jewelry, and various trinkets that caught the light from old brass lamps hanging overhead. Wooden shelves reached toward the ceiling, laden with everything from antique radios to well-worn baseball mitts. The smell of old wood and metal polish hung in the air, mixing with the faint scent of coffee coming from somewhere in the back. Behind the counter stood Maggie Halbrook, her silver hair neatly pulled back, reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she examined what looked like an old pocket watch. She glanced up at the sound of the bell, and a warm smile spread across her face, creating a web of gentle wrinkles around her eyes. "Good morning," she said, setting the watch aside. "Quite the cold snap we're having." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He'd passed this shop countless times, but had never come in before. The weight of the ring in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole straight through to his heart. "Can I help you find something?" Maggie asked, her kind eyes studying his face. Ethan cleared his throat, forcing the words out. "I have something to sell." His fingers trembled as he pulled the ring from his pocket. The gold caught the light, and for a moment, he almost turned around and walked out. Maggie must have sensed his hesitation. She gestured to a stool near the counter. "Why don't you have a seat?" Her voice was gentle, understanding. Sometimes these things take time. Ethan sat, his legs grateful for the support. He placed the ring on the counter, watching as Maggie picked it up with careful hands. She slipped on her glasses and held it up to the light. "Beautiful craftsmanship," she murmured. "Victorian era, if I'm not mistaken. The engraving work is quite—" Her voice trailed off as she noticed the small catch on the side. With practiced fingers, she opened the locket portion of the ring. The color drained from her face. Ethan leaned forward, concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Maggie's hands were shaking as she stared at the tiny photograph inside the ring. "I've kept this photo 20 years, she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'm sorry?" She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "This young woman," she said, tapping the photograph gently. "Sarah Davidson. That was her name, wasn't it?" Ethan felt like someone had knocked the wind out of him. "How did you—" Maggie reached beneath her collar and pulled out a locket. With trembling fingers, she opened it and placed it next to the ring. Inside was an identical photograph, the same young woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling at the camera. 20 years ago, Maggie began, her voice soft with memory. "I was driving home late one night during a terrible storm. There was a bus accident on Route 27. The bus had skidded off the road and caught fire." She touched the photograph in the locket. "I was a nurse back then. I stopped to help. There was this young woman, trapped inside. I managed to get her out just before." "The explosion," Ethan finished, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah told me about that night. She said an angel saved her life." Maggie gave a watery laugh. "Hardly an angel, just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. She gave me this picture afterward, but I never knew what became of her." She looked at him closely. "You're her husband?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet here they were. "Was?" Maggie asked gently, noting his use of past tense. "Cancer. 3 years ago." Maggie closed her eyes briefly, pain crossing her features. "I'm so sorry." She looked down at the ring again, then back at Ethan. Her eyes were kind but determined. "I can't take this." "Please," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I need to." "No," Maggie interrupted firmly. She reached under the counter and pulled out her purse. "This ring belongs with you and your daughter." She started counting out bills. "Mrs. Halbrook, I can't accept." "Some debts," she said, pushing the money across the counter, "take a lifetime to repay. Sarah gave me something precious that night. She gave me hope. She reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place." She closed the ring and pressed it back into his hand. "Take this money, feed your daughter, but keep the ring. Sarah would want that." Ethan stared at the money, then at the ring, his vision blurring. His fingers closed around the warm metal, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than despair, a small flutter of hope, like a candle flickering to life in a dark room. "I don't know how to thank you," he managed to say. "You already have," Maggie replied softly. "You brought her back to me, even if just for a moment." Ethan stood, the money clutched in one hand, the ring in the other. The weight of it felt different now, less like a burden and more like a blessing. He nodded to Maggie, unable to find more words, and turned toward the door. As he stepped back into the cold morning air, the ring secure in his pocket and the money tight in his hand, Ethan felt the strange mix of hope and sorrow settle in his chest. The universe, it seemed, had more surprises in store than he could have imagined. The small apartment felt a bit warmer that evening as Ethan and Lily sat at their worn kitchen table. Steam rose from 2 bowls of heated beans, and a few slices of fresh bread lay between them on a paper towel. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Lily picked up her plastic spoon, her blue eyes bright despite their simple meal. "At least we have food tonight, Daddy." Ethan's throat tightened at her words. Even at 8 years old, she tried so hard to be brave, to make things easier for him. He reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. "That's right, sweetheart, and you know what? Something kind of amazing happened today at the pawn shop." Lily perked up, a bean-loaded spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Really? What happened?" Ethan took a bite of bread, gathering his thoughts. "Well, I met this lady named Maggie. She's older, probably around Grandma's age, and she runs the shop." He paused, still processing the strange encounter himself. "And it turns out she knew your mom." "She knew Mommy?" Lily's eyes went wide, and she put down her spoon. "How?" "It's quite a story," Ethan said, breaking off another piece of bread. "Remember how I told you about the bus accident your mom was in, long before you were born?" Lily nodded solemnly. "When she was in college?" "That's right. Well, Maggie was there that day. She actually helped save your mom's life." Ethan's voice grew soft as he remembered Sarah telling him about that day, how scared she'd been until a kind nurse had pulled her from the wreckage. "Wow," Lily whispered, completely captivated. "Did she remember Mommy right away?" "She had a picture, just like the one in Mom's ring. She kept it all these years, never knowing what happened to that young woman she helped save." Ethan smiled, still amazed by the coincidence. "She was so kind to us, Lily. She wouldn't let me sell the ring, but she gave us money for food anyway." "That was really nice of her." Lily smiled, taking another spoonful of beans. "Maybe she's like our guardian angel." Before Ethan could respond, the phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, surprised to see Halbrook Pawn displayed on the screen. "Speaking of," he murmured, answering the call. "Hello? Ethan?" "It's Maggie from the pawn shop." Her warm voice came through clearly. "I hope I'm not interrupting your dinner." No, we're just finishing up. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, dear. I've been thinking about you and Lily." There was a pause. "I help run a charity program through my church. We assist people who are going through tough times, help them find work, housing, that sort of thing. I thought maybe you'd be interested." Ethan's pride made him want to refuse immediately. He'd always managed on his own, hadn't he? But then he looked at Lily, contentedly eating her beans, and remembered the empty fridge. The eviction notice. I don't know," he said hesitantly. "I'm not really a church person." "That's not required," Maggie assured him. "Quickly, we help anyone who needs it, no strings attached, just people helping people." Lily watched him curiously, sensing something important in his expression. Ethan took a deep breath, thinking of all the repairs he needed to make, not just to their lives, but to his own heart. "Could I maybe come by tomorrow morning? After I drop Lily at school?" "Of course." The smile was evident in Maggie's voice. "We're in the community center behind First Methodist, just 2 blocks from the shop. Come whenever you're ready." After they hung up, Lily helped him clear the table, her movements careful with their few dishes. "Are you going to get help from Maggie's church, Daddy?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I think so, sweetheart, sometimes." He knelt down to her level, looking into eyes so much like her mother's. Sometimes being strong means knowing when to accept help from others. Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." The next morning was crisp and clear as Ethan walked Lily to school. Their breath made little clouds in the air, and frost crunched under their feet. Lily skipped alongside him, her backpack bouncing with each step. "Maybe Maggie will be there today," Lily said hopefully. "I want to meet her and thank her for helping us." "Maybe someday soon," Ethan promised. They stopped outside the school gates, where other children were streaming in. He knelt down and straightened her jacket, making sure she was warm enough. "Have a good day, sweetheart. Learn lots." "I will." She hugged him tight, then pulled back with a serious expression. "You too, Daddy. Don't be scared." Ethan watched her skip into the building, marveling at how she could read him so well. He turned toward the church, his steps slower now, more hesitant. The thought of asking for help, of admitting he couldn't do it alone, made his stomach churn. But he thought of Lily's brave smile over their dinner of beans, of Maggie's unexpected kindness, of Sarah's photo in that ring, preserved all these years by a stranger who had once saved her life. Maybe it wasn't weakness to need help. Maybe it was just part of being human. The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church as Ethan Carter stood awkwardly at the entrance. His work boots felt heavy on the polished wooden floor, and his weathered jacket seemed out of place among the neat rows of pews. He hadn't stepped foot in a church since Sarah's funeral. "There you are." Maggie's warm voice echoed through the quiet space. She hurried over, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Come on, everyone's in the fellowship hall." Ethan followed her through a side door into a large room where about a dozen people bustled around folding tables. The smell of coffee and fresh donuts filled the air. Some sorted through boxes of clothing, while others organized canned goods on metal shelves. "Everyone, this is Ethan Carter," Maggie announced. "He's joining our volunteer team today." A chorus of friendly hellos greeted him. A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Welcome aboard. I'm Tom. We're sorting donations this morning if you'd like to help." Ethan nodded, grateful for the simple task. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, carefully organizing boxes of canned goods. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice how everyone seemed to know each other, sharing jokes and stories while they sorted. "First time volunteering?" A woman about his age asked, placing more cans on the shelf beside him. Her name tag read, Grace. "That obvious, huh?" Ethan managed a small smile. "We were all new once," Grace said. "Lost my job at the factory last year, came here for help, stayed to give back. Sometimes helping others is the best way to help yourself." Throughout the morning, Ethan met others with similar stories. There was Mike, a former construction worker who'd hurt his back, and Jenny, a single mom working 3 part-time jobs. They all spoke of Maggie with the same affection and respect. During their coffee break, Maggie sat with Ethan at a corner table. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "You know, when I first met Sarah, she was helping other passengers off that burning bus, even though she was hurt herself." Ethan's hand tightened around his paper cup. "That sounds like her. She always put others first." "She had the brightest smile," Maggie continued, "even in all that chaos. When I got her to safety, she kept thanking me for helping everyone else. Not once did she complain about her own injuries." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. "She never told me about you specifically, but she always said a kind nurse saved her life that day. Said it taught her that angels walk among us." Maggie's eyes grew misty. "I was just doing my job. But Sarah, she left an impression. I kept that photo she gave me all these years, never knowing what became of her. Now, here you are." They worked through the morning, sorting donations and preparing care packages. Ethan found himself relaxing as he worked alongside the others. When Tom needed help fixing a wobbly table, Ethan's mechanical skills came in handy. The grateful smiles he received warmed something inside him that had been cold for too long. Near lunchtime, a young family came in seeking assistance. The father looked as desperate as Ethan had felt yesterday. Without thinking, Ethan helped Maggie put together a food box for them, adding extra items he knew would help: baby formula, diapers, and some fresh fruit that had just been donated. "You have a good eye for what people need," Maggie observed as they watched the grateful family leave. "Just know what it's like," Ethan replied quietly. "That's why we're here," Maggie said, touching his arm gently. "To help each other through the hard times." Sarah understood that. Now you're carrying on her legacy in your own way. As the afternoon wound down, Ethan helped clean up the ward, Fellowship Hall. His back ached from lifting boxes, but it was a good kind of tired. He'd forgotten how it felt to be useful, to be part of something bigger than his own problems. When it was time to leave, Maggie walked him to his truck. The late afternoon sun painted the church windows in warm colors, and a gentle breeze stirred the fallen leaves in the parking lot. "Thank you," Ethan said, meaning more than just the day's work. Maggie smiled knowingly. No one ever truly has to face life's storms alone. The phone's sharp ring cut through the morning silence. Ethan reached for it with tired hands, his muscles still aching from yesterday's work at the church. The caller ID showed Mike's Auto Shop, and his heart skipped a beat. "Hello?" His voice came out rough and uncertain. "Ethan, it's Mike Harrison." The familiar voice of his old boss brought back memories of better days. "Listen, I know things ended rough last time, but I've got a situation here. Could use someone who knows their way around engines." Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. 6 months ago, he'd lost this job when the shop had to cut staff. Now, hearing Mike's voice again made his stomach twist with a mix of hope and anxiety. "What kind of situation?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Part-time work, mostly. Bikes, some car repairs. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work." Mike paused. "Look, I know it's not much, but it's what I can offer right now." Ethan glanced at Lily's school photo on the kitchen counter. Her bright smile reminded him why he couldn't let pride stand in his way. "When do you need me to start? Can you come in today? Around noon." A few hours later, Ethan stood in the familiar garage. The smell of motor oil and rubber brought back memories, both good and painful. Mike showed him to his old workstation, now dusty with disuse. "First job's a Harley?" Mike said, pointing to a motorcycle in the corner. "Owner wants it running by Friday." Ethan nodded, already assessing the work needed. His hands remembered these movements, like greeting an old friend. But as he began working, doubt crept in. The past months had shaken his confidence more than he'd realized. The afternoon passed in a blur of repairs and careful adjustments. When Mike handed him his day's pay, reality hit hard. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover a week's groceries, but it was something. That evening, after picking up Lily from school, Ethan's phone rang again. This time it was Maggie. "The church needs help organizing donations for the winter clothing drive," she said warmly. "I thought of you right away. We can offer a small stipend." Ethan looked at his meager earnings from the auto shop. "I appreciate that, Maggie. Really do." "You're not alone in this, Ethan," she reminded him gently. "Remember what I said about storms?" He smiled despite himself. "That no one has to face them alone." "Exactly. Come by tomorrow evening if you can." Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a new routine. Mornings at the auto shop, evenings helping at the church. The work was steady, but the pay was tight. Still, he noticed small changes. Mrs. Peterson from the church brought homemade casseroles just because. Mr. Johnson from the hardware store offered him odd jobs, fixing things around the neighborhood. One evening, while sorting through donated coats at the church, Maggie brought him a cup of coffee. "You're doing good work here, Ethan," she said, watching him carefully label each item. Sarah would be proud. The mention of his wife's name still hurt, but differently now, like pressing on a healing wound. "I'm trying," he admitted. "For Lily, and for yourself," Maggie added firmly. Later that night, after a simple dinner of spaghetti, Lily sat cross-legged on their worn couch, homework spread around her. Ethan watched her from the kitchen, noting how she'd grown taller in just these few months. "Dad?" she asked suddenly, looking up from her math book. "Are we going to get a house again?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Their small apartment, with its dripping faucet and drafty windows, was a far cry from the home they'd once had. Ethan crossed the room and sat beside her, gathering his thoughts. "We will, sweetheart," he said finally, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. "I promise you that." Lily leaned into him, her voice small but hopeful. "Like our old house? With a backyard?" "Maybe not exactly like our old house," he said honestly, "but we'll have a place that's ours. Somewhere we can plant flowers again, like you and Mom used to do." She nodded against his shoulder. "I miss our garden." "Me too, honey." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "But you know what? We're going to be okay. It might take some time, but we're going to make it." "Because we have help now?" Lily asked. "Like Miss Maggie and the church people?" Ethan thought about the community that had slowly gathered around them, Maggie's unwavering support, the church members' kindness, even Mike's offer of work. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. "That's right," he said, "because we have help now." Lily hugged him tightly. "I like Miss Maggie. She tells good stories about Mom." "She does, doesn't she?" Ethan smiled, remembering how Maggie had saved Sarah's life all those years ago. "Your mom would have liked her too." "Dad?" Lily looked up at him with serious eyes. "Promise we'll stay here, even if it takes a long time to get a house?" Ethan met her gaze, seeing Sarah's determination reflected there. "I promise, Lily, we're not going anywhere. This is our home now, even if it's not perfect yet. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes, and turned back to her homework. Ethan watched her work, his heart full of both worry and hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, it felt like they were moving forward instead of just struggling to stay afloat. The bell above the pawnshop door chimed softly as Ethan stepped inside. The familiar scent of old wood and metal filled his nostrils. Maggie looked up from behind the counter where she was examining an antique pocket watch. "Right on time," she said with a warm smile. "I've got a few items that could use your magic touch." Ethan set his toolbox down on the wooden workbench in the corner. Magic? More like years of trial and error. "Sometimes that's the same thing," Maggie replied, bringing over a small box filled with broken electronics and timepieces. As Ethan began examining an old radio, Maggie settled into the chair beside him. She watched his careful movements as he opened the back panel and studied the components inside. "You remind me of James sometimes," she said softly. "My husband. He could fix anything, too." Ethan glanced up, noting the distant look in her eyes. "How long has he been gone?" 15 years this October." Maggie touched the locket at her neck. Cancer took him far too quickly. One day he was complaining about heartburn. 6 months later, she trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly, understanding the weight of her loss. "Life has a way of changing course when we least expect it," Maggie continued. "After James died, my son Samuel, well, he changed. Became angry, distant. Started blaming me for not making his father seek treatment sooner." She sighed deeply. "He left town right after the funeral. Haven't spoken to him since." Ethan set down his screwdriver. "That must have been hard, losing them both at once." "It was, but this shop became my sanctuary." Maggie gestured around the cramped space. "Every broken thing that comes through that door has a story. Sometimes fixing what's broken on the outside helps heal what's broken on the inside, too." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Ethan repairing items while Maggie sorted through new acquisitions. As the morning wore on, more customers trickled in, and Ethan noticed how Maggie treated each one with genuine interest and compassion. "You're good with people," he observed during a quiet moment. "They trust you." "Trust is earned through small kindnesses," she replied. "Speaking of which, how's Lily doing?" Ethan's hand stilled on the clock he was fixing. I don't know. I've been so focused on surviving, I sometimes forget she's just a little girl trying to understand why everything changed." "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for," Maggie said gently, "but they need to know they're not alone." "I know I've been distant," Ethan admitted. "Working all these hours, always worried about money. Sometimes I catch her looking at me like she's afraid I might disappear too." Maggie placed a weathered hand on his arm. "Then maybe it's time to show her you're still there." As the days passed, Ethan spent more time at the shop. Maggie taught him about appraising items, dealing with customers, and the careful balance of running a business with compassion. She began trusting him with more responsibilities, even giving him a key to lock up when she had doctor's appointments. One afternoon, while polishing a display case, Ethan found himself sharing stories about Sarah. "She would have liked you," he told Maggie. "She always said kindness was the most valuable thing a person could give." "Sounds like a wise woman," Maggie smiled. "You know, I've been thinking, with your mechanical skills and eye for detail, you could really help grow this place. Maybe even take over someday when these old bones can't keep up anymore." Ethan was touched by her faith in him. "I wouldn't know where to start." "You already have," she replied. "Every person you've helped here, every item you've fixed, that's what this place is about. It's not just a pawn shop, it's a place where hope gets restored." Later that evening, Ethan picked up Lily from school. Instead of heading straight home, he surprised her by turning toward the park. "Really?" Lily's face lit up. "But it's not even the weekend." "I thought we could have a little picnic," he said, pulling out a paper bag with sandwiches he'd prepared that morning. "Maybe talk for a while?" They found a spot under an old oak tree, spreading out on the grass as the setting sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Lily bit into her sandwich, her legs swinging happily. "I like Maggie," she said between bites. "She always gives me candy when I visit the shop." Ethan chuckled. "Is that the only reason?" "No," Lily considered. "She tells good stories too, and she makes you smile more." The simple observation caught Ethan off guard. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, seeing how much she'd grown in these past difficult months. "I know things have been tough," he said softly. I haven't been as present as I should have been. Lily scooted closer to him. It's okay, Daddy. I know you're trying really hard. Things are going to get better, he promised, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. We might not have everything figured out yet, but we're going to be okay. They sat together as the sky deepened to purple, watching other families stroll by and listening to the distant laughter of children on the playground. For the first time in months, Ethan felt truly present in the moment, grateful for this simple time with his daughter. The phone's shrill ring pierced the quiet morning air at the auto shop. Ethan wiped his greasy hands on a rag before reaching for his cell. Seeing Maggie's name on the screen made him smile, but that quickly faded when he heard her trembling voice. Ethan, Maggie's words caught in her throat. I need your help. He'd never heard her sound so frightened. What's wrong? They're going to take the shop. Her voice cracked. I just got the foreclosure notice. I have 30 days. Ethan's stomach dropped. I'm coming right over. He told his boss he needed an early lunch and drove straight to Halbrook's Pawn. When he arrived, he found Maggie sitting behind the counter, a crumpled piece of paper in her hands. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows, catching the silver in her hair. How much do they want? Ethan asked, pulling up a stool beside her. Maggie smoothed out the notice with trembling fingers. $45,000. The property taxes have gone up, and with the repairs needed. She gestured at the old building's worn walls. I've been barely breaking even these past few years. Ethan ran his fingers through his hair. I've got some savings from the auto shop. It's not much, but no. Maggie shook her head firmly. You need that money for you and Lily. You helped us when we needed it most, Ethan insisted. Let me help you now. Maggie's eyes drifted to a faded photograph on the wall, her and her late husband on the day they'd bought the shop. Richard and I built this place together. Every item here has a story. Every corner holds a memory. Her voice softened. This isn't just a shop, Ethan. It's our life's work. Ethan stood up and walked around the cramped space, taking in the shelves crowded with treasures. Old clocks, vintage jewelry, antique furniture, pieces that had passed through countless hands, each carrying its own history. What about all these antiques? He picked up a tarnished silver pocket watch. Some of these must be worth something. Maggie nodded slowly. Many are valuable, but they need repairs. I haven't had anyone skilled enough to fix them properly. I can do it, Ethan said, examining the watch's intricate mechanism. Cars, clocks, electronics, they're not so different when you get down to it. Just smaller parts. Hope flickered in Maggie's eyes. You'd do that? Of course. Ethan set the watch down gently. I can work here evenings after the auto shop. We'll fix up the valuable pieces and sell them for a good price. They spent the next hour going through Maggie's collection, identifying items with the highest potential value. There was a Victorian music box with a broken dancer, an Art Deco lamp with faulty wiring, and several pieces of jewelry that needed cleaning and restoration. Even if we sell everything, Maggie said it might not be enough. Then we'll find another way, Ethan replied firmly. You didn't give up on me and Lily. I'm not giving up on you. They worked out a schedule. Ethan would come by after his shifts at the auto shop, bringing Lily with him. The little girl could do her homework at the counter while they worked, just like she did at the garage. That evening, Ethan sat with Lily on their worn couch in their small apartment. The TV played softly in the background as he tried to find the right words. Sweetheart, you know Miss Maggie's shop? He began. Lily nodded, her eyes serious. Where you found Mommy's picture? That's right. Well, Miss Maggie needs our help now, the shop. It might have to close unless we can raise enough money. But where will all the treasures go? Lily asked, her voice small. Ethan pulled her closer. We're going to try to fix them up and sell them, but if we can't save the shop... He took a deep breath. We might have to move again. The work at the auto shop isn't steady enough without the extra repairs I do at Miss Maggie's. Lily's small hand found his, squeezing tight. It's okay, Daddy. We'll get through it together. She looked up at him with eyes so much like her mother's. Just like you always say. Ethan's throat tightened as he heard his own words of comfort echoed back to him. His daughter, so young yet so strong, giving him the courage he needed. He hugged her close, grateful for her unwavering faith in him, even when his own faith wavered. That's right, sweetheart, he whispered into her hair. We'll get through it together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of the Pierce. Development grew building. Ethan Carter stood in the gleaming lobby, feeling out of place in his worn work boots and faded jacket. The receptionist eyed him with carefully masked disdain. "Mr. Pierce will see you now," she said, gesturing toward a set of imposing oak doors. Ethan's hands were sweaty as he pushed them open. The office beyond was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the small town he called home. Samuel Pierce sat behind an enormous desk, his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair a stark contrast to Ethan's shabby appearance. "Mr. Carter," Samuel said without looking up from his computer. "You have 5 minutes." Ethan cleared his throat. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Pierce. I'm here about Maggie Halbrook's pawn shop." At the mention of Maggie's name, Samuel's fingers paused over his keyboard. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What about it?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "She needs help with the mortgage. I was hoping we could work something out, a loan, maybe, or an extension on the payments." Samuel finally looked up, his eyes cold. "And why would I do that?" "Because that shop means everything to her. It's not just a business, it's a failing enterprise in a prime location," Samuel cut in. "Sentiment doesn't pay bills, Mr. Carter." Ethan took a deep breath. "I know you used to know her son. She told me, 'Stop right there.'" Samuel's voice turned to ice. "My connection to Margaret Halbrook is none of your concern. The shop is being foreclosed because she can't make payments. That's business, pure and simple. But if you could just—" I said no. Samuel stood up, straightening his tie. "The property will be worth far more once that old shop is torn down. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual business to attend to." Ethan didn't move. "She saved my wife's life once," he said quietly. "Did you know that? And now she's helping me and my daughter when we need it most. That's the kind of person she is, the not kind who gives without asking anything in return." Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, but it vanished quickly. How touching. "But this isn't a Hallmark movie, Mr. Carter. This is reality, and in reality, failing businesses fail." "She helped raise you," Ethan pressed, desperate now. "She told me about the summers you spent there, learning to fix things with your father." Samuel's face hardened. "Get out." "Mr. Pierce, please, security," Samuel barked into his phone. 2 burly men in dark suits appeared within seconds. Ethan raised his hands in surrender. "I'm going." "But think about what you're doing. That shop isn't just a building, it's a piece of your family's history." Samuel turned his back, staring out the window. "Remove him." The security guards took Ethan's arms, but he shrugged them off. "I can walk myself out." In the lobby, the receptionist pointedly avoided his gaze as he passed. Outside, the cold winter air bit at his face, but Ethan barely noticed. His mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. The drive back to the pawn shop felt longer than usual. Every mile marker reminded him of his failure. He'd promised Maggie he'd find a way to help, and he'd come up empty-handed. When he pulled into the shop's gravel parking lot, he sat in his truck for a few minutes, gathering his courage. Through the window, he could see Maggie helping a customer, her face animated as she examined what looked like an old watch. Even now, she was doing what she loved, helping people preserve their memories. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Maggie looked up, hope written across her face. "It didn't go well," Ethan said before she could ask. "I'm sorry, Maggie." "I tried, but he wouldn't even consider it." Maggie's shoulders slumped slightly, but her smile remained gentle. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to do that, Samuel. He's not the kind of man who changes his mind easily." "He's your family," Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. "How can he just— Family's complicated," Maggie interrupted softly. "Sometimes the harder you try to hold on, the more they pull away." She moved around the counter, patting Ethan's arm. "But you, trying to help like this? That means more than you know." Ethan looked around the shop, at the carefully arranged displays, the worn wooden counters polished by decades of use, the wall of photos showing all the people Maggie had helped over the years. "We can't let him win," he said firmly. "There has to be another way." Maggie smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "We'll get through this," she said, squeezing his hand. "I believe in us." The bell above the pawn shop door chimed as Maggie hung up a hand-painted sign that read, "Community Donation Drive, Help Save Halbrooks." The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows, casting warm patches of light across the wooden floors. Ethan stood on a ladder, carefully arranging donated items on the highest shelves, while Lily sorted through a box of old costume jewelry at a small table nearby. "Look, Daddy!" Lily held up a tarnished silver locket. "Can you fix this one?" Ethan climbed down and examined the piece. "Sure can, sweetheart. Just needs a good cleaning and a new clasp." He ruffled her hair, grateful for her enthusiasm. Maggie watched them with a gentle smile. "You've got quite the helper there, Ethan. She's got a good eye for treasure," he replied, pocketing the locket. "Speaking of which, where do you want these old watches?" Before Maggie could answer, Mrs. Peterson from the bakery bustled in, carrying a cardboard box. "I found these in my attic," she announced. "They were my mother's china plates. I know they're chipped, but maybe—" "They're beautiful," Maggie assured her, carefully lifting out a delicate plate with hand-painted roses. "Ethan's been working miracles with repairs lately." Throughout the morning, more townspeople arrived with donations. Mr. Jenkins brought his grandfather's pocket watch collection. The Henderson sisters contributed vintage quilts their grandmother had made. Each item came with a story, a memory that Maggie listened to with genuine interest while Ethan examined the repairs needed. In the back room, Ethan set up a makeshift workshop. The familiar smell of metal polish and wood cleaner filled the air as he worked. His hands moved steadily, fixing clasps, mending chains, and restoring the shine to old silver. The work reminded him of peaceful evenings in his garage before everything fell apart. "You remind me of Thomas," Maggie said softly, watching him work. "My husband, I mean. He could fix anything too." Ethan looked up from the antique clock he was repairing. "Samuel helped out here too, didn't he?" Maggie's eyes grew distant. She picked up a small brass compass from the workbench. "Yes, this was his first repair project. He was 12. She turned the compass over in her hands. Thomas spent hours teaching him how to clean each part, how to realign the needle. Samuel was so proud when it finally pointed true north again. "What happened between you two?" Ethan asked gently. Maggie set the compass down carefully. "After Thomas died, Samuel changed. He wanted to sell the shop, said we could make more money in real estate development. But this place," she gestured around the workshop, "it's more than just a business. It's where people bring their memories to be mended." Samuel couldn't understand that. From the front of the shop, they heard Lily's excited voice greeting new customers. Maggie brightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "Better get back out there. Those stories won't listen to themselves." The days began to take on a rhythm. Mornings were spent sorting through new donations. Afternoons, Ethan repaired while Lily did her homework at the counter, occasionally helping customers find treasures among the shelves. After school, more volunteers arrived, teenagers learning basic repairs, retired craftsmen sharing their skills. Word spread through the small town. The local paper ran a story about Maggie's decades of helping others through hard times. People began bringing not just items to sell, but skills to share. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant taught Lily how to spot authentic jade. Old Mr. Turner, the retired jeweler, spent hours showing Ethan tricks for working with delicate settings. One particularly busy afternoon, Ethan looked up from his workbench to see the shop filled with customers. Sunlight streamed through the newly cleaned windows, making the restored items gleam. Lily was carefully wrapping a repaired music box for a customer using the technique Maggie had taught her. The older woman stood nearby, beaming with pride. The brass bell above the door chimed steadily as more people entered. Some came to buy, others just to share stories about items Maggie had helped them find or preserve over the years. The cash register rang more frequently than Ethan had heard since starting work there. Watching it all, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Real, solid hope that seemed to shine as brightly as the polished silver in the display cases. Maybe, just maybe, they could save this place after all. Mrs. Peterson returned that afternoon to buy back her mother's china plates, now expertly repaired. As she carefully counted out her money, she smiled at Maggie. "You know, dear, I thought I was just donating some broken dishes, but seeing them whole again, it's like getting a piece of my mother back." Maggie squeezed her hand. "That's what we do here. We don't just fix things, we keep memories alive." Ethan watched them from his workbench, a half-repaired pocket watch in his hands. The shop hummed with conversation and laughter. Lily moved between customers, proudly showing off items her father had repaired. For the first time since losing Sarah, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching the dust motes and golden beams. The shop glowed with warmth, life, and possibility. Ethan looked around at the fuller shelves, the steady stream of customers, and the smile on Maggie's face. Maybe some broken things really could shine again. The winter sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Pierce Development's downtown office. Ethan Carter shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair facing Samuel Pierce's massive mahogany desk. The room felt too clean, too perfect, like a museum where everything was just for show. Samuel Pierce stood by his floor-to-ceiling window, hands clasped behind his back. He hadn't even offered Ethan a seat. Ethan had simply taken one after 5 minutes of standing. "Mr. Pierce?" Ethan began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I know you're busy, but I needed to speak with you about Maggie's shop again." Samuel turned slowly, his expensive suit catching the morning light. His face remained as emotionless as a statue. "Mr. Carter, I believe we covered this topic in our last meeting. Just hear me out." Ethan leaned forward, resting his calloused hands on his knees. "That shop means everything to your mother. We're making progress with the fundraising." "Progress?" Samuel's laugh was sharp and cold. "Let me be clear. That property is worth far more than whatever loose change you're collecting from weekend yard sales." The words stung, but Ethan pressed on. "It's not just about money. That shop has been helping people for decades. Your father built—" "Don't." Samuel's voice turned to ice. "Don't talk about my father." He walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder, dropping it with a thud. "See these? These are the development plans for that entire block. Modern retail spaces, luxury apartments, a complete transformation of that run-down neighborhood." Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at the glossy renderings. Where Maggie's shop stood, there was nothing but gleaming glass and steel. "You'd just erase it, like it never existed?" "Progress requires change, Mr. Carter." Samuel's fingers drummed against the desk. "That shop is a relic. My mother's sentimentality is holding back the entire community's potential." "Community?" Ethan stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "That shop is the heart of the community. Your mother has helped more people than you." "My mother," Samuel cut in, "lives in a fantasy world where kindness pays the bills. I learned long ago that business and emotions don't mix." Ethan studied Samuel's face, searching for any trace of the boy Maggie had described, the one who used to help his father repair watches and radios. "She misses you, you know." Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, but it vanished quickly. "This meeting is over, Mr. Carter. The development moves forward as planned." "What happened to you?" Ethan asked quietly. "What made you so cold?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Reality happened. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual business to attend to." Ethan walked to the door, his steps heavy. At the threshold, he turned back. "Your mother never gave up on you. Even after all these years, she keeps your picture in that shop, right next to your father's. Get out." Samuel's voice trembled slightly. The elevator ride down felt endless. Ethan's mind raced with guilt and doubt. He'd promised Maggie he'd help save the shop, but facing Samuel's determination, it felt hopeless. What right did he have to get involved in this family drama? He was just a broken-down mechanic who couldn't even keep his own life together. The familiar bell above Maggie's shop door chimed as Ethan entered. The warm smell of wood and metal wrapped around him like a comforting blanket, so different from the sterile air of Samuel's office. Maggie looked up from her workbench, her reading glasses perched on her nose. One look at Ethan's face told her everything. "Sit down, dear. I'll make us some tea." "Maggie, I'm sorry," Ethan said, sinking into the old wooden chair beside her workbench. "I thought I could reason with him, but he's still as stubborn as his father." Maggie finished, setting down 2 steaming mugs. "Don't blame yourself, Ethan. Samuel's heart hardened long before you came along." "Maybe I'm making things worse," Ethan admitted. "Getting involved in your family matters. I should focus on my own problems." Maggie reached across the workbench and squeezed his hand. Her palm was warm from the mug. "Not everything is about money. Some things are about heart. And you, Ethan Carter, have more heart than most." "But what good is heart against development plans and profit margins?" Ethan asked, staring into his tea. "More than you might think," Maggie smiled gently. "You know, when my husband started this shop, everyone said he was foolish. Said pawn shops were dying, that he should invest in something more modern. But he believed in people and their stories, their treasures, their hope." Ethan nodded, thinking of his own wedding ring that Maggie had refused to take. "I just don't want to let you down." "You couldn't if you tried," Maggie assured him. "Whatever happens to this building, you've already helped save something more important: faith in human kindness." Ethan stood up, his tea barely touched. "I should go." Lily will be waiting after school. Ethan, Maggie called as he reached the door. Remember what I told you about Sarah? How she never gave up, even when that bus was burning? Yeah, well, neither will we. Ethan stepped out into the cold afternoon, his breath forming clouds in the air. Samuel's gleaming office building loomed in the distance, a monument to progress and profit. But Ethan's heart felt heavy with the weight of his failure, uncertain of what steps to take next. The acrid smell of smoke filled the cold night air as Ethan's truck screeched to a halt in front of Maggie's pawn shop. Orange flames licked the sky, casting an eerie glow over the street. His heart hammered in his chest as he jumped out, leaving the driver's door wide open. "Maggie!" he shouted, running toward the burning building. Two firefighters intercepted him, their thick-gloved hands gripping his shoulders. "Sir, you need to stay back," one of them ordered firmly. "But my friend, she owns the shop." Ethan struggled against their hold, his eyes scanning desperately through the smoke. "She's safe," the other firefighter assured him. "She's over there with the paramedics." Through the chaos of flashing lights and bustling emergency workers, Ethan spotted Maggie sitting on the back of an ambulance. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and her face was streaked with soot. Her eyes were fixed on the flames consuming her beloved shop. Ethan rushed to her side. "Maggie, are you hurt?" She didn't look at him, didn't even seem to register his presence. Her voice came out in a whisper. Everything's gone, Ethan." The firefighters worked tirelessly, but the old wooden building was already too far gone. Water hissed as it hit the flames, creating clouds of steam that mixed with the thick smoke. The heat was intense, even from where they Saturday I was closing up, Maggie said, her voice hollow. "I smelled something burning in the back room by the time I got there." She trailed off, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his own heart breaking as he watched decades of memories turn to ash. The ring, Sarah's ring, was in there, along with the precious photograph it contained. The last physical connection he had to his wife, now lost to the flames. Neighbors and townspeople gathered on the street, their faces reflecting the orange glow of the fire. Some were crying, others stood in shocked silence. The pawn shop had been more than just a business. It had been the heart of their community. Hours passed, and finally, the flames died down, leaving behind a blackened skeleton of what had once been Maggie's pride and joy. The morning sun began to peek over the horizon, revealing the full extent of the destruction. The roof had collapsed, and the windows were blown out. Everything inside was either burned or water damaged beyond repair. "I should have checked the wiring," Ethan muttered, running his hands through his hair. "I work on electronics all the time. I should have." "Don't," Maggie said sharply, finally turning to look at him. "Don't you dare blame yourself, Ethan Carter." But the guilt ate him anyway. He'd been so focused on saving the shop from foreclosure that he hadn't considered other dangers. And now, not only was the building destroyed, but all the donated items people had trusted them with were gone too. As the firefighters began rolling up their hoses, Ethan helped Maggie to her feet. "You can stay with us," he offered, but she shook her head. "My sister's coming to get me," she said quietly. I need some time." The following days passed in a blur. Ethan went through the motions at work, but his mind kept returning to the site of the burning building. He avoided driving past the charred remains of the shop, taking the long way around town. The guilt and sense of failure weighed heavily on him. He'd promised to help save the shop, and instead, he'd watched it burn to the ground. The community's donations, their trust, Maggie's livelihood, all gone in a single night. One evening, he sat on his small apartment's front porch, staring in the direction of the pawn shop, even though he couldn't see it from there. The metal chair creaked under him as he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Maybe it was time to move on. He'd been fooling himself, thinking he could build a new life here. Every time he tried to help, things just got worse. The thought of facing Maggie, of seeing the pain in her eyes, was almost unbearable. The screen door squeaked behind him, and small footsteps approached. Lily sat down next to him on the step, her favorite stuffed bear clutched in her arms. "Mrs. Wilson at school asked about Miss Maggie today," she said softly. "I told her about the fire." Ethan nodded, unable to find words. "Daddy?" Lily's small hand found his arm. "Remember when my bike broke and you couldn't fix it right away?" He turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "Yeah, Princess. You told me to never give up," she continued, her young face serious in the fading light. "You said sometimes things break, but that doesn't mean they can't be fixed." You taught me to never give up, Daddy." The simple wisdom in her words hit him like a physical blow. He'd been so wrapped up in his own guilt and shame that he'd forgotten the very lessons he'd tried to teach his daughter. Lily looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, full of trust and love, reminding him that giving up had never been an option before, not when Sarah died, not when they lost their house, not ever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the charred remains of Maggie's pawn shop. Ethan stood beside her, both of them silent as they surveyed the damage. The acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air, a constant reminder of their loss. Lily sat on the curb nearby, drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. A postal worker approached, holding out an envelope. "Mrs. Halbrook, this just came for you." Maggie's hands trembled as she opened the letter. Her eyes widened as she read, and tears began to roll down her weathered cheeks. "It's from Samuel," she whispered. Ethan tensed beside her. "What does he want now?" He's canceling the foreclosure," Maggie said, her voice barely above a whisper. She handed the letter to Ethan, who read it quickly, his expression shifting from disbelief to cautious hope. "There's more," Maggie continued. "He's offering us land to rebuild, a piece of property just 2 blocks from here." She pressed a hand to her heart. "My son, after all these 2 years." Ethan frowned, crossing his arms. Why would he do this now, after everything that's happened? Lily wandered over, sensing the change in mood. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart." Ethan smoothed her hair. "Mister, Pierce wants to help us rebuild the shop." "Really?" Lily's face lit up. "That's wonderful." Maggie sat heavily on a nearby bench, still clutching the letter. "Samuel writes that he's been watching us these past weeks. He saw how the community came together, how you never gave up, Ethan." She looked up at him. "He says your dedication reminded him of his father." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unused to praise. "I just did what needed doing." "No," Maggie said firmly. "You did more than that. You showed him what this place means to people, what it could mean again." Lily tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Can we make it even better than before, Daddy?" Maggie's eyes suddenly sparked with inspiration. What if we made it more than just a pawn shop? What if we turned it into a place where people like you and Lily could come when they need help?" "A community center?" Ethan asked, beginning to see the possibility. "Yes." Maggie stood up, energy returning to her movements. "We could still have the pawn shop part, but also space for job training, counseling, maybe even temporary housing upstairs. Like the church program, but bigger," Ethan mused, remembering how that first offer of help had changed his life. They walked together to view the new property just a few minutes away. It was an empty lot, bigger than the old shop location, with mature trees providing shade along one side. Lily immediately ran to explore, her footsteps kicking up small clouds of dust. "There's room here," Ethan said, his mechanic's mind already planning. "We could design it right from the start to be what people need." Maggie watched Lily playing. "Samuel writes that he'll help with the permits and construction costs." She paused, emotion thick in her voice. "He says he wants to make things right." Ethan thought about his own journey, how close he'd come to giving up. Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what really matters. As the day progressed, they gathered supplies for a small campfire on the property. The spring evening was mild, and stars began appearing overhead. Lily helped arrange chairs around the fire pit they'd created from loose bricks. They sat together, the flames casting warm light on their faces. Maggie pulled out a notebook, and they began to plan. Lily contributed her own ideas, some practical, "We need lots of bathrooms," and some fanciful, "Can we have a rainbow slide?" "What about a workshop area?" Ethan suggested. "I could teach basic repair skills, help people fix their own things instead of having to buy new." Maggie nodded, making notes. "And a kitchen where we could teach cooking classes, help families stretch their food budgets, and a playground," Lily added emphatically, "so kids have somewhere safe to play while their parents are learning stuff." The fire crackled, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. Ethan looked at Maggie and Lily, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The loss of the old shop still hurt, but something new was growing from its ashes. "We'll call it Halbrook's Hope," Maggie announced, writing it at the top of her page. "Because that's what we're really offering people. Hope and a helping hand," Ethan agreed, thinking of that first day when Maggie had refused to take his ring. They continued planning as the fire burned lower, their voices mixing with the chorus of evening crickets. The empty lot around them seemed to fill with possibilities, and for the first time since the fire, they all felt the warmth of genuine optimism. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty lot where Maggie's pawn shop once stood. A crowd had gathered, their work gloves on and determination etched on their faces. Ethan stood beside Maggie, watching as pickup trucks loaded with lumber and building materials rolled in. "I still can't believe this is happening," Maggie whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "Believe it. This whole town knows what you mean to them." The reconstruction efforts started with clearing away the last of the debris. Ethan worked alongside local contractors who had volunteered their time. His shirt soon soaked with sweat as they laid the foundation for the new building. Lily sat nearby on an overturned bucket, carefully sorting nails into different containers. Samuel arrived mid-morning, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. He stood at the edge of the lot, watching the activity with an unreadable expression. Ethan noticed him first and walked over, wiping his dusty hands on his jeans. "Didn't expect to see you here," Ethan said carefully. Samuel shifted his weight. "I wanted to see how things were progressing." He glanced toward Maggie, who was directing volunteers on where to stack building materials. "She looks... well, she's stronger than any of us knew," Ethan replied. He picked up a spare hard hat and held it out. "Want to help?" Samuel hesitated, then took off his suit, jacket, and rolled up his sleeves. As they worked side by side securing floor joists, Samuel's expensive shoes getting covered in sawdust, he finally spoke again. "I haven't worked with my hands like this since I was a teenager," he admitted. "Dad used to make me help out in the shop every weekend." Ethan nodded, encouraging him to continue. They moved on to the next joist, and Samuel's movements became more confident as muscle memory took over. "We fought about everything," Samuel continued. "The shop, my career choices, my lifestyle. But the final straw was when I told them I was selling my share of the business to pursue real estate development." He paused, hammering a nail with more force than necessary. "Dad died 3 months later. Mom and I barely spoke after that." "That's a long time to carry that weight," Ethan said quietly. Samuel looked up at the framework taking shape around them. "I convinced myself I was right. That the shop was holding them back, holding me back. But seeing all these people here," he gestured at the volunteers, "maybe I was the one who couldn't see what was really valuable." Throughout the day, more townspeople arrived with food and drinks for the workers. The atmosphere was almost festive, despite the hard work. Lily ran between groups, delivering water bottles and sandwiches, her smile brightening everyone's spirits. By late afternoon, the basic structure was taking shape. Samuel had shed his dress shirt, working in his undershirt alongside everyone else. Ethan noticed him stealing glances at Maggie, who was carefully avoiding looking in his direction. "You know," Ethan said as they took a water break, "she keeps all your old report cards in a box under the counter. Or she did, before." He trailed off, not wanting to mention the fire. Samuel's face softened. "She does? Along with every newspaper clipping about your business success. She's proud of you, even if she doesn't know how to say it." Samuel wiped his forehead with his sleeve, leaving a smudge of dirt. "I don't know how to bridge that gap anymore. It's been too long." "Sometimes," Ethan said, thinking of his own losses, "we wait too long for the perfect moment to make things right. But all we really have is now." The sun was getting low when Maggie approached them, carrying 2 bottles of water. She handed one to each of them, her hands trembling slightly. "The northwest corner needs reinforcing," she said, addressing neither of them in particular. "I'll take care of it," Samuel replied softly. "I remember how Dad always insisted on double bracing the corners." Maggie's eyes welled up, but she quickly turned away. Samuel watched her go, then headed to the corner with his tools. Ethan followed, and they worked in companionable silence as the day's light faded. As the volunteers began packing up for the day, Maggie found Ethan sitting on a stack of lumber, watching Lily help collect scattered tools. "You've been quite the peacemaker today," she said, settling beside him. "I just know what it's like to wish you could say things to someone before it's too late." Maggie nodded, her eyes on Samuel as he spoke with the contractors about the next day's work. "I've held on to that anger for so long, I almost forgot what it was like to just be his mother." She reached for Ethan's hand. "Thank you, Ethan, for helping me remember that forgiveness isn't just about letting go of the past, it's about making room for the future." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the skeleton of the new building in shades of gold. The pawn shop was coming back to life, and with it, something else was being rebuilt, something even more precious than walls and windows. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the newly restored storefront of what was once simply Maggie's pawn shop. Fresh paint gleamed on the wooden trim, and polished brass letters spelled out the new name that would soon be unveiled. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, adjusting his tie nervously while watching people gather for the grand reopening. "You clean up nice," Maggie said, appearing beside him. She wore a simple blue dress, her silver hair neatly styled. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears as she surveyed the building. "Never thought I'd wear a tie again," Ethan admitted, tugging at the collar. "Lily picked it out, and she did a wonderful job." Maggie patted his arm, her hand trembling slightly. "I keep thinking this is all a dream. After the fire, I thought." "I know." Ethan covered her hand with his. "But here we are." More townspeople arrived, carrying dishes for the potluck celebration. The whole street buzzed with excitement. Children darted between adults' legs, and the air filled with the sounds of greetings and laughter. Old Mrs. Peterson brought her famous apple pie, while Mr. Jenkins from the hardware store carried boxes of paper plates and plastic utensils. Lily bounded down the sidewalk in her best dress, her hair in neat braids. "Daddy, Miss Maggie, look how many people came." "Sure did, sweetheart." Ethan lifted her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Seems like the whole town is here." A black car pulled up to the curb, and Samuel Pierce stepped out, looking uncomfortable in an expensive suit. The crowd parted slightly, conversations hushing. Maggie's breath caught, and Ethan felt her grip his arm tighter. Samuel approached slowly, holding a small wrapped package. "Mother," he said softly, then cleared his throat. I brought something for the opening." Maggie's voice wavered. "You didn't have to, Samuel." "Yes, I did." He held out the package. "Please." With trembling fingers, Maggie unwrapped it. Inside was a framed photograph, an old picture of her late husband, standing proudly in front of the original pawn shop, a young Samuel by his side. "I found it in my office," Samuel explained. "I've had it all these years, but it belongs here, with you." Tears spilled down Maggie's cheeks as she traced the image with her finger. "Oh, Samuel." Samuel shifted his weight, clearly struggling with what to say next. Then, to everyone's surprise, he turned to address the gathered crowd. "I owe all of you an apology," he announced, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Especially you, Mother. I let greed and pride blind me to what really matters. This shop. It's more than just a building. It's a piece of our town's heart. My father understood that. You understood that." He swallowed hard. "And I forgot it." Maggie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her son. The crowd broke into applause, and several people wiped away tears. Ethan felt Lily squeeze his hand, and he looked down to see her beaming. "Time for the unveiling," Ethan called out, wanting to give mother and son a moment to compose themselves. He and Mr. Jenkins moved to where a sheet covered the new sign. Maggie and Samuel joined them, standing together as Ethan and Mr. Jenkins pulled the sheet away. The brass letters caught the morning sun, Halbrook's Hope and Repair. More applause erupted. Someone started singing Amazing Grace, and others joined in. Maggie unlocked the front door, and people began flowing inside to see the renovated space. The interior had been transformed. Gone were the dark, cramped aisles of before. Now, warm lighting illuminated open spaces where restored furniture and carefully arranged items were displayed. A special corner had been set aside as a reading nook for children, complete with comfortable chairs and donated books. Along one wall, a workspace had been set up where people could learn basic repair skills. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, turning in a circle to take it all in. The townspeople explored the shop, exclaiming over the changes. Mrs. Peterson set up the food table, and soon the smell of coffee and baked goods filled the air. Samuel stayed close to his mother, listening as she showed him the photographs and mementos they'd managed to save from the fire. Ethan watched it all from near the counter, his heart full. Just months ago, he'd walked in here desperate and ashamed, ready to sell his last connection to Sarah. Now, he stood in the same spot as part owner, surrounded by a community that had become family. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, look!" She pointed to where Maggie and Samuel sat together on an old restored bench, heads bent close in conversation. Both were smiling through tears. Sometimes broken things just need a little love to shine again, Ethan said, remembering Lily's words from that terrible night after the fire. "Just like us?" Lily asked. Just like us, sweetheart. They stood together, watching their neighbors celebrate. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the brass letters of the new sign and making them glow. Outside, more people arrived, carrying dishes and gifts. Inside, laughter and conversation filled every corner of the space that had become so much more than just a pawn shop. It was a place of second chances, of hope restored, of community strengthened through adversity. And as Ethan held his daughter close, watching Maggie and Samuel reunite, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the newly installed windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair. Ethan Carter moved slowly through the rebuilt shop, running his hand along the freshly painted walls. The grand reopening had been a success, but there was still work to be done. Boxes to unpack, shelves to organize, and remnants of the old shop to sort through. His boots crunched over small pieces of debris as he made his way to the back room. Though most of the fire damage had been cleared away, this corner still held a few boxes of salvaged items they hadn't gotten around to sorting. Lily was at school, and Maggie was handling paperwork with Samuel in the office, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the quiet task ahead. He knelt beside a weathered cardboard box, its edges darkened with soot. Inside were odds and ends they'd recovered from the fire, old clock parts, tarnished silverware, and pieces of jewelry too damaged to restore. His hands moved methodically through the items, separating what could be saved from what needed to be discarded. Something caught his eye, a glint of metal beneath a pile of charred papers. Ethan reached down, his fingers closing around a small, familiar shape. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled it free from the debris. It was a locket, its silver surface blackened but intact. His hands trembled as he recognized the intricate pattern etched into its surface, the same design that had been on Sarah's wedding ring. With careful fingers, he worked at the clasp, holding his breath as it finally clicked open. "Oh my God," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. There, nestled inside the scorched locket, was his wedding ring. The gold band was tarnished but whole, and when he lifted it out with shaking fingers, he could still make out the inscription inside. Forever and always, Sarah. But what made his chest tighten was the small photograph, somehow preserved within the locket's protection. Sarah's smile beamed up at him, just as bright and beautiful as the day they'd Wednesday. Ethan sank back against the wall, clutching the locket to his chest. Tears welled in his eyes as memories washed over him. Sarah's laugh, the way she danced with Lily in their kitchen, her quiet strength during difficult times. The ring had been more than just a piece of jewelry. It had been his last physical connection to her, and losing it in the fire had felt like losing her all over again. "Still looking after us, aren't you?" he murmured, running his thumb over the photograph. The paper was slightly discolored around the edges, but Sarah's face remained clear, those kind eyes that had always seen the best in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. A warm breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it the scent of spring flowers from the newly planted garden outside. For a moment, Ethan could have sworn he caught a hint of Sarah's favorite perfume, vanilla and jasmine. He closed his eyes, letting himself remember how she used to say that love was like a circle, with no beginning and no end. The sound of footsteps made him look up. Through blurry eyes, he saw Maggie standing in the doorway, concern written across her face. "Ethan, are you all right?" she asked softly, making her way carefully across the room. He held out the locket, watching as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Found it in one of the salvage boxes," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "The ring, the photo. They're still here, Maggie. After everything, they survived." Maggie settled beside him on the floor, her movements careful as she took the locket in her weathered hands. She examined it with wonder, touching the photograph gently. "Oh my," she breathed. "Look at that smile. Just like I remember her from that day by the road." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sharing the weight of memory and miracle. Ethan thought about all that had happened since that desperate morning when he'd first walked into Maggie's shop, how close he'd come to selling this precious piece of his past, and how that decision had led him here, to this new beginning. "You know," Maggie said finally, handing the locket back to him, "I've seen a lot of things come through this shop over the years. Some items are just things. They break, they wear out, they get lost. But others?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Some things are meant to last forever." Ethan cradled the locket in his palm, feeling its familiar weight. "Sarah used to say that love was like that too," he said quietly. that it doesn't end, even when we can't see it anymore. Smart woman, you're Sarah, Maggie replied, and she was right. Love leaves marks on our hearts, our lives, just like this ring left its mark on both our stories. Some bonds can't be broken, not even by fire. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the small church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Ethan sat next to Lily, adjusting her dress collar while Maggie settled in beside them. The familiar scent of old hymnals and polished wood filled the air. Samuel Pierce stood at the entrance, hesitating. His usual confident stride was replaced by uncertain steps as he made his way down the aisle. When Maggie spotted him, her breath caught. She gripped the back of the pew, her knuckles white. "Mom," Samuel said softly, his voice carrying in the quiet church. A few early churchgoers turned to watch, but Samuel didn't seem to notice. "I was hoping we could talk." Maggie's eyes welled with tears. "Of course, Samuel." She patted the space next to her. Ethan grabbed Lily's hand. "Let's give them some privacy, sweetheart." But Maggie touched his arm. "Stay," she whispered. "Your family too." Samuel sat down, his expensive suit creasing as he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "About Dad, about the shop, about everything." Maggie reached for her son's hand. He didn't pull away. "When Dad died," Samuel continued, "I was so angry. Angry that he left us. Angry that you wanted to keep running that old shop instead of selling it like I suggested." He shook his head. "I thought I knew better. I thought success meant bigger buildings and more money." "Your father loved that shop," Maggie said gently. "It wasn't just about the business. It was about helping people, about being part of something bigger than ourselves." "I know that now." Samuel's eyes were red-rimmed. "Watching how this community came together, seeing how Mr. Carter here fought so hard to help you." He glanced at Ethan. "It reminded me of how Dad used to be. How he'd stay late fixing things for people who couldn't afford to pay much." Lily, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "My daddy does that too. He fixed Mrs. Johnson's clock, even though she could only pay with cookies." Samuel smiled at the little girl. "Your daddy's a good man, sweetheart." He turned back to Maggie. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for walking away, for trying to force you to sell the shop, for all of it." Maggie pulled her son into a tight embrace. Years of tension melted away as Samuel hugged her back, his shoulders shaking slightly. The church organist began playing softly, preparing for the morning service. Other families filed in, but the small group remained in their intimate bubble of reconciliation. After the service, they gathered at the newly rebuilt pawn shop. Samuel ran his hand along the freshly painted counter, the same one his father had stood behind for so many years. "I remember doing homework here," he said, "while Dad taught me about different tools and how to spot valuable antiques." "You were always good at it," Maggie said, pride in her voice. "Better than me at determining values, but you were better at seeing the value in people," Samuel replied. He picked up an old pocket watch from the display case. "Remember when Miss Turner brought this in? Dad spent hours fixing it, even though it wasn't worth much." "It was worth everything to Mr. Turner," Maggie said. "It was his grandfather's." She turned to Ethan. "That's what I've been trying to teach Ethan. Every item that comes through that door has a story, a meaning beyond its price tag." Ethan nodded, thinking of his own wedding ring and the miracle of its survival. "I'm learning that some things can't be measured in dollars." Over the next few weeks, Samuel became a regular fixture at the shop. He'd come in during his lunch breaks, rolling up his designer shirt sleeves to help sort through inventory. His business expertise proved valuable as they organized the shop's finances, but more importantly, he was rebuilding his relationship with his mother. Maggie glowed with happiness, teaching both Samuel and Ethan the intricacies of the business. She shared stories about items they'd acquired over the years, about the people they'd helped, and about the legacy her husband had built. "You see," she told them one afternoon as they worked together, "this shop isn't just about buying and selling. It's about preservation of memories, of hope, of connections between people." Samuel looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. "I get that now, Mom. I really do." He gestured around the shop. "This place, it's not just a business. It's everything Dad believed in. Everything you've kept alive all these years." Ethan watched them, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He thought about how this place had saved him and Lily, how it had given them a second chance. The shop wasn't just four walls and inventory, it was a living, breathing testament to the power of love and community. Speaking of preservation, Maggie said, pulling out an old leather-bound book, your father kept detailed records of every major repair he ever did. Samuel, would you like to see them? Mother and son bent over the book together, their heads closed as they flipped through yellowed pages filled with careful handwriting. Ethan could see the emotions playing across their faces, joy, nostalgia, and a deep appreciation for the legacy they shared. Lily, who had been sorting through a box of costume jewelry, came to stand beside her father. Daddy, she whispered, are we going to stay here forever? Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, watching as Maggie showed Samuel an entry about his first repair job as a teenager. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. I think we are. This isn't just a shop anymore, it's home. The winter air was crisp as people filed into the warmly lit church hall. Christmas decorations still hung from the ceiling, twinkling in the soft light. Ethan Carter stood near the entrance, adjusting his tie nervously. He watched as familiar faces streamed in Dockers, people who had become more than just neighbors over the past few months. Daddy, look! Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing to a table laden with cookies and punch. Mrs. Jenkins brought her famous sugar cookies. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and Ethan couldn't help but smile. She was wearing the new dress Maggie had given her for Christmas, her hair neatly braided. You can have some after the speeches? He promised, smoothing down her hair. His daughter's happiness meant everything to him, and seeing her flourish in their new community filled his heart with joy. Maggie appeared beside them, elegant in a blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. Are you ready? She asked, giving Ethan's arm a gentle squeeze. As ready as I'll ever be, he replied, taking a deep breath. Public speaking wasn't his strong suit, but tonight felt different. He had something important to share. The church hall was packed, with extra chairs brought in to accommodate everyone. Pastor Roberts stood at the podium, welcoming the congregation to the New Year's gathering. Ethan scanned the crowd, recognizing faces that had become dear to him. The auto shop owner who'd given him work, the volunteers from the charity program, and even Samuel, sitting quietly in the back row. Tonight, Pastor Roberts announced, we have two special speakers who remind us that faith and community can move mountains. Please welcome Maggie Halbrook and Ethan Carter. The applause was warm and genuine as Maggie stepped up to the podium first. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. A year ago, I thought I was going to lose everything, she began. The pawn shop that my late husband and I built together was slipping away. But God works in mysterious ways. He sent me Ethan Carter. Ethan felt his cheeks flush as heads turned toward him. Lily squeezed his hand proudly. Through Ethan, I learned that sometimes we have to lose something to gain something greater, Maggie continued. The fire that destroyed our shop didn't destroy our spirit. Instead, it brought my son back to me. She glanced at Samuel, who lowered his head, emotion visible on his face. It showed us that when we stand together, we're stronger than any challenge life throws our way. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, his legs felt wobbly as he approached the podium. But as he looked out at the sea of friendly faces, he found his strength. These people had become his family. 6 months ago, he started, his voice growing steadier with each word. I was a broken man. I'd lost my job, my home, and my hope. All I had left was my daughter Lily and a wedding ring that held memories of my late wife, Sarah. He paused, touching his chest where the restored ring now hung on a chain. I came to Maggie's shop thinking I had to sell the last piece of my heart to survive. Instead, I found something priceless. I found all of you. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Lily beamed up at him, and Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. This community taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's strength. You showed me that even when we think we're alone, we're not. Every person in this room has contributed to rebuilding not just the pawn shop, but my faith in humanity. He looked at Maggie, who nodded encouragingly. When the shop burned down, I thought it was the end. But you all proved me wrong. You showed up with hammers and paintbrushes. You donated your time and resources. You believed in us when we couldn't believe in ourselves. Ethan's voice grew stronger as he continued. Today, Halbrook's Hope and Repair stands as more than just a business. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we work together. It's a place where broken things and broken people can find new purpose. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. Even the children sat still, sensing the importance of the moment. As we start this new year, Ethan said, I want to thank each of you for being part of our miracle, for showing my daughter what real community looks like, for helping me remember that hope isn't just a word, it's an action we choose every day. When he finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. People stood up, some wiping tears from their eyes. Lily ran up to hug him as he stepped down from the podium, and he lifted her into his arms, holding her close. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of warm conversations and shared laughter. People came up to share their own stories of how the shop had touched their lives. Samuel approached them briefly, shaking Ethan's hand with genuine respect before joining his mother. As the gathering wound down, Ethan and Lily prepared to leave. The night air was cold but clear, stars twinkling overhead. Lily slipped her small hand into his as they walked home. I'm proud of you, Daddy, she said softly. Ethan squeezed her hand, his heart full. I'm proud of us, sweetheart. We've come a long way. They walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. The streets were peaceful, holiday lights still glowing in windows. Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, from desperation to hope, from isolation to community. Each step felt like a step into a brighter future. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the empty church, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. Samuel Pierce stood in the doorway, his usually confident posture now uncertain as he watched his mother arranging fresh flowers at the altar. The familiar scent of lilies, his father's favorite, filled the air. Maggie looked up, her hands stilling on the stems. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of 20 years of silence hung between them like a heavy curtain. Mom, Samuel said softly, his voice catching. He cleared his throat and tried again. I thought I might find you here. Maggie's eyes glistened, but she kept arranging the flowers. You remembered I always come early on Sundays. You and Dad never missed a service. Samuel took a few steps forward, his expensive shoes clicking against the wooden floor. Even when I was being difficult about coming, a small smile touched Maggie's lips. You were quite the handful during those teenage years. Samuel reached the front pew and sat down heavily, loosening his tie. I was worse than difficult. I was cruel. Maggie set down the flowers and turned to face her son. The morning light caught the silver in her hair, reminding Samuel how much time they'd lost. The things I said when Dad died. Samuel's voice cracked. About the shop being worthless, about you living in the past. I was so angry and scared. I couldn't handle seeing you struggle alone. Samuel, Maggie said gently, sitting beside him. You were grieving too, but I abandoned you. His shoulders slumped. I threw myself into making money, into proving I could be successful without the shop, without. He swallowed hard. Without you and Dad. Maggie reached for his hand, her touch tentative. Samuel gripped it tightly, like a drowning man finding a lifeline. The shop was never just about money, she said. Your father understood that. It was about helping people, about keeping faith when times were hard. Like with Ethan and his little girl. Samuel nodded, thinking of Ethan's determination to save the shop. He reminded me of Dad, you know. The way he wouldn't give up, how he put others first. He laughed softly. I tried so hard to be cold, to treat it like just another business deal, but watching him fight for you, it brought everything back. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become, Samuel. Not because of your success, but because you found your way back to what really matters. I miss him so much, Mom. Samuel's voice broke. I miss the way he'd whistle while he worked, how he knew the story behind every item in the shop. I miss Sunday dinners and helping him fix things, and I miss you. Maggie wrapped her arms around her son, and Samuel buried his face in her shoulder like he used to do as a child. His body shook with quiet sobs. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Can you ever forgive me? Oh, my boy, Maggie stroked his hair. I forgave you long ago. I've just been waiting for you to forgive yourself. They held each other for a long moment, years of pain and regret washing away in their tears. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel wiped his eyes with his sleeve, not caring about his expensive suit. The shop, he said, straightening up. I want to help rebuild it, really rebuild it. Not just the building, but everything it stands for. Will you let me? Maggie's face lit up with joy. Nothing would make me happier. And I want to learn from you, Samuel continued, about the people who come in, their stories. Dad always said every item had a history, a heart behind it. I never understood that before. It's never too late to learn, Maggie said softly. Your father's tools are still there, waiting for the right hands. Samuel smiled, a genuine smile that made him look young again. Maybe I could start coming by on Sundays, after service, like we used to? Maggie squeezed his hand. I'll make your favorite pot roast. From the back of the church, Ethan watched the scene unfold. He'd come early to help Maggie with the flowers, but stopped short when he saw Samuel enter. Now, seeing mother and son reunited, he felt a warmth spread through his chest. His own daughter's words echoed in his mind. Even broken things can shine again. How right she had been. Here was living proof that with enough love, patience, and faith, even the deepest wounds could heal. Ethan watched as Maggie and Samuel stood together, looking at the altar where the morning light painted everything in gold. Their shadows merged on the floor, no longer separated by the gulf of years and misunderstandings. He thought of his own journey, from desperation to hope, from isolation to community. How fitting that the pawn shop, a place where people brought their precious things in times of need, had become a sanctuary for healing broken relationships too. Quietly, not wanting to interrupt their moment, Ethan slipped back outside into the morning air. He could return later to help with the flowers. Right now, this time belonged to Maggie and Samuel, a mother and son finding their way back to each other after so long apart. As he walked down the church steps, Ethan smiled, grateful too, witnessed such a powerful reminder that it's never too late for a new beginning. The morning sun streamed through the newly installed windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair, casting warm patches of light across the polished wooden floors. Ethan Carter sat behind the counter, his fingers tracing the smooth surface where countless items had changed hands over the years. Beside him, Lily swung her legs from a tall stool, humming softly as she arranged a display of restored music boxes. Maggie stood nearby, carefully dusting an antique clock that Ethan had brought back to life just days ago. You know, Maggie said, her eyes twinkling, I never thought this old place could look so beautiful again. Ethan gazed around the shop, taking in the neat rows of restored items, the fresh paint on the walls, and the new glass cases gleaming under the morning light. Everything felt different now, lighter, more hopeful. Even the air seemed clearer, carrying the mingled scents of wood, polish, and fresh coffee from the small pot they kept brewing in the back room. Me neither, he admitted, watching Lily adjust a particularly ornate music box. Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come. Lily looked up from her work, her small face bright with pride. Remember when you first brought me here, Daddy? Everything was so dusty, and now it's like a treasure room. Maggie chuckled, setting down her dust cloth. A treasure room indeed. But the real treasures aren't the things we fix. They're the people who come through those doors. Ethan nodded, thinking about all the faces he'd seen since they'd reopened. People brought in more than just broken items. They brought their stories, their hopes, their memories. Each repair felt like helping piece together something more than just metal and wood. You know what I love most? Lily piped up, carefully closing the lid of a music box. When people come back to get their fixed things and their faces light up like Christmas morning, that's because your daddy has magic hands, Maggie said, giving Ethan a warm smile. Just like my Harold used to have. Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. He remembered the days when he thought his hands were only good for fixing cars, when the weight of failure had made every movement feel heavy and worthless. Now, those same hands had helped rebuild not just objects, but lives, including his own. I had good teachers, he said quietly, glancing at Maggie. Both here and gone. They all knew he was thinking about Sarah. Her presence, though invisible, seemed to fill the shop sometimes, especially in the quiet moments like these. The ring, now displayed in a special case near the counter, caught the morning light and sparkled softly. Lily hopped down from her stool and went to the display case, pressing her small hand against the glass. Mom would have loved this place, wouldn't she? She would have. Ethan agreed, his voice thick with emotion. She always believed in second chances. Maggie moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. Second chances, third chances, as many as it takes. That's what this place is all about now. The bell above the door chimed, and they all looked up to see Samuel entering, carrying a box of fresh pastries from the bakery down the street. His presence in the shop had become a regular thing now, a healing balm to years of absence. Thought we could use a morning treat, he said, setting the box down on the counter. Business looks good today. Uncle Sam, Lily exclaimed, abandoning her post by the display case to peek into the box. The title had come naturally to her over the past few weeks, and Samuel had accepted it with misty eyes. Ethan watched as Maggie's face softened at the sight of her son, the years of pain melting away like morning frost. Samuel had changed too, the hard edges of the businessman giving way to something warmer, more genuine. Perfect timing, Maggie said, already moving to the back room to fetch cups for coffee. We were just having a moment of reflection. Those seem to happen a lot around here, Samuel observed, helping himself to a Danish. Must be something in the air. It's the magic, Lily declared seriously, selecting a chocolate-filled croissant. Daddy says this place has always had it. Ethan smiled, remembering the first time he'd walked through the door, desperate and ashamed, clutching Sarah's ring like a lifeline. He'd been looking for money then, but what he'd found was worth so much more. The magic of good people, he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Maggie. And second chances. And family, Maggie added, pouring cups for herself and Samuel. Both the kind we're born with and the kind we find along the way. They gathered around the counter, this unlikely family brought together by loss and hope and the mysterious workings of fate. Through the window, Ethan could see people beginning to fill the sidewalks, some surely making their way to the shop with broken things that needed fixing. To new beginnings, Samuel said, raising his coffee cup. To new beginnings, they echoed, and even Lily joined in with her cup of hot chocolate, careful not to spill it. The morning sun continued to pour through the windows, warming them all in its gentle light. Ethan looked at the faces around him, his daughter's innocent joy, Maggie's maternal wisdom, Samuel's renewed purpose, and felt a deep sense of peace settle in his chest. This was what Sarah would have wanted for them, not just survival, but true living, surrounded by love and purpose. Here, in this place of broken things made whole again, they had all found their way home. The evening sun cast long shadows through the newly restored windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair. Ethan sat with Lily on the old leather couch in the corner of the shop, his arm wrapped around her small shoulders. The shop had closed for the day, and the quiet settled around them like a comfortable blanket. "You know what, sweetheart?" Ethan said, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I've been thinking about something important." Lily looked up at him with those big brown eyes that reminded him so much of Sarah. "What is it, Daddy?" "Well," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I want you to know that no matter what happens in life, you and me, we're a team. Always will be." Lily snuggled closer to him. "Like how we stuck together when things got really hard?" "Exactly like that." Ethan smiled, running his hand over her hair. "You were so brave during all of that. Just like your mom would have been." The mention of Sarah made Lily sit up straighter. "Tell me more about Mom, please?" Ethan's heart swelled with both joy and sadness. He glanced around the shop, taking in the carefully arranged displays, the meticulously repaired items, and the warm glow of the vintage lamps they'd restored together. "You know, your mom is everywhere in this place," he said, gesturing to their surroundings. "See that clock on the wall? The one with the wooden birds that come out every hour?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Your mom loved birds. She used to say they were like little messengers of hope, always singing, even when the sky was gray." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Is that why you worked so hard to fix it?" "That's right." Ethan smiled, remembering the hours he'd spent carefully repairing the intricate mechanism. "And you know what else? Every time I help someone fix something they love, I think about how your mom always wanted to help people too." He stood up and walked with Lily to the workbench where he spent most of his days. Tools were neatly arranged and several items waited for repair. "Your mom believed that everything broken deserved a second chance. Just like Maggie gave us one. And like how the whole town helped save the shop?" Lily asked, running her fingers along the smooth wood of the workbench. "Exactly like that, sweetie." Ethan picked up a small music box he'd been repairing. "When I work on these things, it's like your mom is right here with me, guiding my hands." They walked together through the shop, Ethan pointing out different items that reminded him of Sarah. At each one, he shared a memory, painting a picture of the wonderful woman who had been taken from them too soon. "Mom would love this place, wouldn't she?" Lily said, her voice full of certainty. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. "She really would, honey. And you know what? She'd be so proud of you. The way you've handled everything, how you've helped me stay strong." Lily hugged him tightly around the waist. "I just did what Mom would have done." Ethan had to take a deep breath before he could speak again. "That's right. You're so much like her, strong, kind, always thinking of others." They made their way to the front counter, where Ethan had been working on something special. He reached beneath it and pulled out a small velvet box. "Remember the ring that survived the fire?" he asked, opening the box to reveal Sarah's restored wedding ring, now gleaming as if it were new. Lily's eyes widened. "It's beautiful, Daddy. I've been thinking about what to do with it," Ethan said, turning the ring so it caught the light. "And I finally figured it out." He walked to a prominent display case near the entrance, Lily following close behind. With careful movements, he placed the ring on a small velvet cushion. From his pocket, he pulled out a hand-lettered card he'd prepared earlier and propped it up beside the ring. "Priceless, paid in full," Lily read aloud. "What does that mean?" Ethan knelt beside her, bringing them eye to eye. "It means that some things are worth more than money. This ring represents all the love your mom gave us, all the help Maggie and the town gave us, and all the second chances we've received. We can never repay that kind of love with money. It's already been paid for with something more valuable. With our hearts?" Lily asked softly. "With our hearts," Ethan agreed, pulling her into a tight hug. "And as long as we keep sharing that love with others, your mom's spirit will always be with us." Lily reached out and touched the glass case gently. "Can we help other people find their second chances too?" "We already are, sweetheart." Ethan smiled, looking around at the shop that had become so much more than just a business. "Every person who walks through that door gets a chance to fix something broken, just like we did. And that's exactly what your mom would have wanted." They stood together in the warm evening light, father and daughter, watching as the sun's rays made the ring sparkle in its new home. In that moment, Ethan felt Sarah's presence more strongly than ever, wrapped around them like a gentle embrace, reminding them that love never truly goes away, it just finds new ways to shine. The morning sun streamed through the newly installed windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair, casting warm rectangles of light across the polished wooden floor. Ethan stood behind the counter, watching as people filtered in and out of the shop. It wasn't just a pawn shop anymore, it had become something more meaningful, a place where hope lived. A young mother walked in, clutching her toddler's hand. Dark circles under her eyes told a story Ethan knew too well. She approached the counter hesitantly, her shoulders tense. "I heard you might be able to help," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "My car broke down, and I can't get to work." Ethan smiled gently. "Let's see what we can do about that." He gestured toward the small office, where they now handled community assistance cases. "Come on in." Maggie was already there, organizing paperwork. Her silver hair caught the sunlight as she looked up, her face brightening with a welcoming smile. "Good morning. Please, have a seat." The woman sat down, her child climbing into her lap. As she shared her story, Ethan recognized the same desperation he'd felt not so long ago. He and Maggie exchanged knowing looks. "We have a program for situations just like this," Maggie explained, pulling out a form. "Ethan, here's an excellent mechanic, and we can work out a payment plan that won't strain your budget." Relief flooded the woman's face. "Really? I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let us help," came Samuel's voice from the doorway. He stepped in, his business suit a stark contrast to the casual atmosphere of the shop. But his eyes were warm, so different from the cold man Ethan had first met. "That's what we're here for." After the woman left, clutching a service voucher and wiping grateful tears, the three of them gathered in the office. Samuel loosened his tie and sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "You know," he said, "I used to think success meant having the biggest buildings, the most money." He looked around the modest office, taking in the wall of thank you cards from people they'd helped. "I was wrong." Maggie reached out and squeezed her son's hand. "We all learn our lessons in different ways, Samuel." Ethan nodded, thinking of his own journey. "Sometimes the hardest falls teach us the most important things." He paused, remembering those desperate days when he'd first walked into the shop with Sarah's ring. "We need to make sure this place stays strong, keeps helping people who need it." "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss," Samuel said, sitting up straighter. "I've been thinking about setting up a proper foundation, something that would ensure the shop's mission continues, no matter what." Maggie's eyes widened. "Samuel, are you sure?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," he replied. "We could help more people, expand our programs, maybe even open similar centers in other towns." Ethan felt something stir in his chest, hope, but bigger than just for himself this time. "I'm in," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." They spent the next hour outlining their vision, making plans and promises. Samuel would handle the legal and financial aspects. Maggie would continue managing the day-to-day operations, and Ethan would oversee the practical assistance programs. "We should make it official," Maggie suggested, pulling out an old leather-bound ledger, the same one she'd used to record pawn transactions for decades. "Write it down, like a pact." Samuel picked up a pen and wrote in his neat handwriting, "We, the undersigned, commit to maintaining Halbrook's Hope and Repair as a sanctuary of help and hope for all who need it. We promise to preserve its mission of kindness, compassion, and community support for generations to come." They each signed their names beneath the declaration. As Ethan wrote his signature, he thought about Lily, about the legacy he was helping to build for her. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Lily burst in, home from school. She carried a paper in her hand, waving it excitedly. "Daddy, look what I made in art class today." Ethan took the drawing from her. It showed the shop, but not as it was. In Lily's vision, it was surrounded by a garden, with people smiling and helping each other. At the top, she'd written in careful letters, "Where Hope Lives." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Maggie and Samuel, who were both smiling at the artwork. "This is exactly what we're building, isn't it?" Maggie nodded, wiping a tear from her eye. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said softly. Samuel stood up, straightening his jacket. "Well, I think this calls for a celebration. How about ice cream for everyone?" "Really?" Lily bounced on her toes, looking at her father for permission. Ethan smiled, watching his daughter's joy. Seeing the way she fit so naturally into this makeshift family they'd created, he thought about Sarah, about how proud she would be of what they'd built from the ashes of loss and despair. As they walked toward the ice cream parlor down the street, Lily skipping ahead with Maggie, Ethan caught sight of their reflection in a store window. He saw not just himself and his daughter, but a whole community of people who had become family. In Lily's bright eyes and confident stride, he saw the future they were building, one small act of kindness at a time. He watched as Lily turned back to make sure he was following, her smile as bright as the summer Sunday. In that moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that the legacy they were creating wasn't just about helping others, it was about showing the next generation that love, hope, and resilience could overcome any obstacle. Ethan sat in the quiet corner of Halbrook's Hope and Repair, his weathered hands resting on the wooden counter where he'd helped countless people over the past months. The morning sun streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, casting warm patterns across the floor. The shop wouldn't open for another hour, giving him a rare moment of solitude to think. His eyes drifted to the glass case where Sarah's ring sat, carefully displayed. The silver band caught the light, and the tiny photograph inside remained a testament to enduring love. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore, it had become a symbol of everything he'd learned since that desperate morning when he'd first walked into Maggie's shop. "Daddy?" Lily's voice echoed from the back room. "Can I organize the books again?" "Sure, sweetheart," he called back, smiling at her enthusiasm. The sound of her footsteps padding across the floor filled him with a familiar warmth. Watching her arrange the small lending library they'd set up, Ethan remembered how different things had been just months ago. He'd been a broken man then, barely holding on, trying to shield Lily from their struggles, but probably failing more than he'd succeeded. "You know what, Lily?" he said, walking over to help her with a particularly heavy stack of books. "I remember when we could barely afford dinner. Now, look at us, we're helping other families put food on their tables." Lily nodded sagely, her small hands carefully straightening a row of paperbacks. "Like how Miss Maggie helped us?" "Exactly like that." Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. He'd been so proud once, too proud to accept help when he needed it most. Now he understood that pride had nothing to do with it. Love was about both giving and receiving, about building connections that made everyone stronger. The bell above the door chimed softly, and Maggie walked in, carrying a tray of coffee cups. "Thought you two might need some breakfast," she said, setting them down. "Samuel's bringing donuts later." Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully. "You don't have to keep taking care of us, Maggie." She fixed him with one of her knowing looks. "Family takes care of family. You taught me that, remember?" He did remember. It had been during the rebuilding of the shop, when he'd insisted on working extra hours to make sure everything was perfect. He told her then that family wasn't just about blood, it was about who showed up when you needed them most. Lily skipped over to hug Maggie, and Ethan watched them together. His daughter had blossomed in these past months, no longer carrying the weight of their uncertain future on her small shoulders. She smiled more, laughed more, and had even started making plans for what she wanted to be when she grew up a shop owner, just like Maggie. Remember when you wouldn't even let me help you carry groceries? Maggie teased him, ruffling Lily's hair. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. I was a different man then. No, Maggie corrected gently. You were always this man, you just needed reminding. He thought about that as he sipped his coffee. The old Ethan had been consumed by fear and shame, convinced that asking for help meant he was failing as a father. Now he understood that true strength lay in being vulnerable enough to accept support when it was offered. Walking over to the window, Ethan looked out at the street where people were beginning to start their day. He recognized most of them now, the baker who sometimes brought day-old bread for families in need, the retired teacher who volunteered to tutor kids after school, the mechanic who'd given him that first part-time job when he needed it most. Daddy, Lily called, interrupting his thoughts. Can we put up the new sign today? He turned to see her holding the hand-painted wooden board they'd made together. It read, Need help? Just ask. We're all family here. That's perfect timing, sweetheart, he said, moving to help her. As they worked together to hang the sign, Ethan felt the familiar ache in his chest, not of loss anymore, but of gratitude. He could almost hear Sarah's voice, approving of the man he'd become, the father he was growing into. The morning light caught the ring in its display case again, and Ethan paused to look at it. He used to see it as a reminder of what he'd lost, but now he understood it differently. It was a bridge between past and present, between grief and healing, between isolation and community. You're thinking deep thoughts, Maggie observed, coming to stand beside him. Just realizing how much has changed, he replied, how much I've changed. Love does that to a person, she said simply. When you let it in, it changes everything. Lily appeared between them, slipping her small hand into Ethan's. Her touch grounded him, as it always had, but now it felt different. Instead of feeling the crushing weight of responsibility, he felt strength, the strength of a father who knew he wasn't alone anymore, who had learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the shop with golden light. Soon they would open the doors, and people would come in with their broken things and heavy hearts, looking for help. And Ethan would be ready, not because he was stronger or smarter than before, but because he finally understood what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. He squeezed Lily's hand, feeling the quiet confidence that had replaced his old fears. Together, they stood in the warm morning light, surrounded by the proof that love, given and received, could rebuild more than just a pawn shop. It could rebuild a life. The morning sunlight streamed through the newly installed windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair, casting warm patches of light across the polished wooden floors. Ethan Carter stood beside his daughter Lily, his hand resting gently on her shoulder as they watched the bustling activity around them. The shop had come alive in ways he never thought possible. Daddy, look! Lily pointed excitedly at a young couple examining an antique clock Ethan had recently restored. That's the one you fixed last week. Ethan smiled, remembering the hours he'd spent carefully bringing the timepiece back to life. Sure is, sweetheart. Sometimes the oldest things just need a little care to shine again. The shop had transformed from Maggie's humble pawn store into something much more meaningful. Display cases lined the walls, filled with restored treasures that told stories of second chances. In one corner, a small cafe served coffee and pastries, creating a warm gathering space for the community. The repair workshop, visible through a large window, showed several volunteers learning basic repair skills from Ethan himself. Maggie appeared beside them, her eyes twinkling with joy. Would you look at this place? She said, gesturing around the room. I never thought I'd see it so full of life again. Samuel, who had been helping a customer, joined their small group. The tension that had once defined his relationship with his mother had melted away, replaced by an easy familiarity that warmed Ethan's heart. The community center idea was brilliant, Mom, Samuel said, squeezing Maggie's shoulder. We've helped more families in the past month than I could have imagined. Lily tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Can I go help Mrs. Peterson with the book corner? She asked, referring to the reading nook they'd set up for children whose parents were receiving assistance or learning new skills. Of course, sweetie. Ethan nodded, watching as his daughter skipped away. She had bloomed in this new environment, showing a natural talent for helping others that reminded him so much of Sarah. The thought of his late wife brought a different kind of ache now, not the sharp pain of loss, but a gentle reminder of love that had shaped his life. He walked over to the central display case, the one that had become the heart of the shop. Inside, carefully arranged items told the story of their journey. Photographs of the old shop, newspaper clippings about the fire, and pictures of the community coming together to rebuild. Still can't believe how it all turned out, Maggie said softly, joining him at the case. When I first saw that ring of yours, I never imagined it would lead to all this. Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Sarah would have loved this place, he managed. She always believed in helping others, even when we had nothing ourselves. A young mother entered the shop, clutching a broken toaster and looking uncertain. Ethan recognized that look. He'd worn it himself not so long ago. Samuel immediately moved to welcome her, explaining their program where people could learn to repair their own items or receive help if needed. You've created something special here, Ethan, Maggie said, watching the interaction. This isn't just about fixing things anymore. It's about fixing lives. The truth of her words struck him deeply. Every corner of the shop held evidence of transformation. The skills training area where he taught basic repairs, the counseling room where people could get help with financial planning, the children's space where Lily now sat reading to younger kids. We all did this together, Ethan corrected. Her, watching as more people filtered in through the doors. Some came to browse, others to learn, and many simply to be part of the warm atmosphere that had become a cornerstone of their community. Lily returned from the reading corner, her face glowing with satisfaction. Jenny said she wants to be a teacher now, she announced proudly, referring to one of the regular children who visited. I told her she could practice reading to the little kids here, just like I do. Ethan pulled her close, marveling at how wise his little girl had become. Through all their struggles, she had maintained a spirit of kindness that humbled him. You're good at showing people their potential, just like your mom was. The mention of Sarah made Lily's eyes drift to the special display case near the register. Inside, nestled on a small velvet cushion, sat the wedding ring that had started everything. The gold band still gleamed, and though the photograph inside had faded slightly, the love it represented remained as strong as ever. Moving toward the case, Ethan carefully lifted it open. The familiar weight of the ring in his palm brought back memories of that desperate morning when he'd first walked into Maggie's shop, ready to sell his last connection to Sarah. Now he understood that he'd never really been at risk of losing that connection. It lived on in Lily's smile, in the way they helped others, and in the community that had become their extended family. Sometimes the best gifts come disguised as our greatest challenges, Maggie observed, watching as Ethan held the ring up to the light. The tiny photograph caught the sun, and, for a moment, Sarah's smile seemed to shine as brightly as it had in life. Around them, the shop continued its daily rhythm of healing and hope. A father and son worked together at the repair table, learning to fix a bicycle. An elderly woman taught a young girl to knit in the crafting corner. Samuel led a small group through basic budgeting skills in the meeting room. This was Sarah's true legacy, Ethan realized. Not just the ring that had brought him to Maggie's shop, but the ripple effect of kindness that had spread through their entire community. Each person who walked through their doors carried that legacy forward in their own way. With gentle reverence, Ethan placed the ring back in its display case. The small plaque beneath it read, "Priceless, paid in full." But he knew the real value lay in the journey it inspired. The ring wasn't just a symbol of his past love anymore. It had become a beacon of hope for their future. The evening sun cast long shadows through the newly installed windows of Halbrook's Hope and Repair. Ethan Carter stood behind the counter, polishing an old brass clock while Maggie organized receipts nearby. The shop had that familiar smell of wood polish and metal, but now it carried something else too, hope. Remember when you first walked in here? Maggie asked, her eyes twinkling as she looked up from her paperwork. You look like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Ethan set down the clock and smiled. I was. Never thought selling my wedding ring would lead to all this. He gestured around the renovated space, taking in the neat rows of restored items, the fresh paint, and the wall of success stories, photographs of people they'd helped get back on their feet. God works in mysterious ways, Maggie said softly. She pulled out a worn leather chair and sat down, patting the seat next to her. Come, sit with me for a moment. Ethan joined her, feeling the comfortable silence that came with true friendship. Through the front window, they could see Samuel across the street, helping an elderly woman with her groceries. The sight made Maggie's eyes water. I never thought I'd see my boy being kind again, she whispered. Sometimes I think about how close I came to losing him forever. She reached for Ethan's hand and squeezed it. You helped bring him back to me. We helped each other, Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. When I came in here that day, I thought I was at rock bottom, but really, I was just beginning. The late afternoon light caught the glass display case where Sarah's ring, now Saturday. The small plaque beneath it read, "Priceless, paid in full." Ethan's eyes lingered on it, remembering the morning they'd found it in the ashes, somehow preserved despite the fire. "Sarah would be proud of you," Maggie said, following his gaze. "The way you've raised Lily, how you've helped so many people. You've turned pain into purpose." Ethan nodded, thinking of his daughter. "Lily's been my anchor through all of this. She never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself." The bell above the door chimed, and Lily bounded in from school, her backpack bouncing. Her face lit up when she saw them. "Daddy, Miss Maggie, look what I made in art class." She pulled out a colorful drawing of their shop, with stick figures of all of them standing out front, including Samuel. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Maggie beamed, carefully taking the drawing. "This is going right up on our wall of memories." Lily grinned and hugged them both before settling on the floor with her homework. Ethan watched her, marveling at how resilient children could be. She'd been through so much, yet her spirit remained unbroken. "You know," Ethan said quietly to Maggie, "I used to think being strong meant handling everything alone. Now I know it's about letting people in, letting them help you carry the load." Maggie nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's what community is all about. We're stronger together than we ever could be apart." Through the window, they watched as Samuel finished helping the elderly woman and headed back toward the shop. He'd changed so much in the past few months, letting go of his anger and reconnecting with his mother. The transformation had been remarkable. "Sometimes I think about all the coincidences that brought us here," Ethan mused. "You saving Sarah all those years ago, me walking into your shop that day, even the fire that nearly destroyed everything, it all led to something greater." "Those weren't coincidences, Ethan," Maggie said with certainty. "They were little miracles, pushing us toward healing. We just had to be brave enough to recognize them." Samuel entered the shop, carrying a box of donated items. "Got some more treasures for you to fix up, Ethan?" he called out, setting the box on the counter. He ruffled Lily's hair as he passed, earning a giggle from her. Ethan stood and walked to the counter, examining the contents of the box. Each item represented another opportunity to help someone, to restore not just objects, but hope. He picked up an old pocket watch, turning it over in his hands. "You know what I love most about fixing things?" he asked, looking at Maggie and Samuel. "It's not just about making something work again. It's about preserving memories, keeping stories alive." Maggie joined him at the counter, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly what we do here. We help people hold on to what matters most." The sun was setting now, painting the shop in warm golden light. Lily packed up her homework and came to stand beside her father, slipping her small hand into his. Ethan felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. "Ready to head home, sweetheart?" he asked, squeezing her hand. Lily nodded, but first turned to hug Maggie and Samuel goodbye. The gesture was so natural now, so full of genuine affection. They weren't just friends anymore, they were family. "Same time tomorrow?" Samuel asked, already knowing the answer. "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied with a smile. "There's always something that needs fixing." As they prepared to leave, Ethan took one last look around the shop. The place that had once represented his lowest moment now stood as a testament to renewal and hope. He thought of Sarah's ring in, the display case, no longer a symbol of loss, but a reminder of love's enduring power. Maggie caught his eye and smiled knowingly. No words were needed. They both understood the magnitude of their journey, the grace that had brought them to this moment. Hand in hand, Ethan and Lily walked toward the door. The bell chimed once more as they stepped out into the evening air, their hearts full of gratitude for the family they'd found and the future they'd built together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.